The Deepening Shadow. A Lovecraftian Horror. Part 5. The door closes. Sarah Chen did not remember choosing. She remembered the light, the water, the face rising from the pool. She remembered the warmth of the thing that had been waiting for her, the voice that was not a voice, the words that were not words. She remembered letting go. And then she was standing on the street outside her apartment building in the cold, gray light of a December morning, with no memory of how she had gotten there. The mark on her hand was gone. She stood in the cold for a long time, watching her breath form clouds in the air, trying to remember what she had chosen. The memory was there somewhere just beyond her reach. She could feel it, like a word on the tip of her tongue, a dream that faded as she tried to hold it. She had chosen something. She had let something happen. She had opened something that could not be closed. Her phone rang. It was Marcus. "Sarah." His voice was raw, shaking. "You need to come downtown. Something's happening." The something was happening all over the city. The first reports came from the subway. Trains were stopping, their lights flickering, their doors opening onto stations that were not on any map. Passengers reported seeing shapes in the tunnels, shapes that moved too fast to be rats, too large to be anything that should be living beneath the city. Some said they heard chanting. Some said they heard screaming. Some said they heard nothing at all, and that was worse. Then the streets began to crack. It started near the Bowery, where the old warehouse had stood, where the sub-basement had been sealed. The asphalt buckled, split, sank. Water rose from below, black and thick, smelling of salt and rot. People fled, cars stalled. The city that never slept was waking to a nightmare it did not understand. By the time Sarah reached the perimeter, the National Guard had been called in. Soldiers in hazmat suits were setting up barricades, turning back traffic, herding civilians away from the growing sinkhole. A lieutenant stopped her at the line. "You can't go in there, ma'am. It's not safe." "I'm Detective Chen, NYPD. I've been investigating this since the beginning. I need to see what's happening." The lieutenant looked at her badge, at her face, at something in her eyes that made him hesitate. He stepped aside. "Don't go too close," he said, "and don't touch the water." The sinkhole was not a sinkhole. It was a door. Sarah stood at its edge, looking down into a darkness that seemed to go on forever. The walls were not earth and stone. They were brick and iron, old, ancient, carved with symbols that she had seen in John Mendez's notebooks. And at the bottom, far below, she could see light. Not the light of the sun, not the light of any lamp. It was the light that had filled the cathedral, the light that had risen from the pool, the light that she had touched when she chose. The light was growing brighter. And something was moving in it. She heard them before she saw them. A sound like wet leather, like meat being torn, like something that should not be alive dragging itself across stone. She backed away from the edge, her hand reaching for the weapon she no longer carried. They came out of the darkness like a tide. Shoggoths. She knew the name from Barlow's journals, from the pages that had made her sick to read, from the sketches that had made her close the book and not open it again for 3 days. They were not creatures, not in any sense that the word applied. They were masses of protoplasm, black and glistening, covered in eyes that opened and closed at random, mouths that gaped and snapped, limbs that formed and dissolved and reformed as they moved. They had no shape, no form, no purpose but to consume, to spread, to bring the darkness up from below. They were coming out of the sinkhole, and there were hundreds of them. Sarah ran. She ran toward the barricades, toward the soldiers, toward anything that could stop what was rising. She heard screaming behind her, and then she heard something else. Engines, heavy engines grinding across the broken asphalt, roaring as they came to a stop at the edge of the pit. Flame. White, brilliant, searing. It poured from the nozzles of 3 military vehicles that she had never seen before, trucks with tanks on their backs and hoses that spat fire like dragons. The Shoggoths screamed, a sound that was not a sound, a vibration that shook the air in her lungs and began to retreat, to dissolve, to fall back into the darkness. A hand grabbed her arm. She spun, ready to fight, and found herself facing a woman in a dark coat, her face hidden behind a gas mask, her eyes old and knowing. "You're the one who opened the door," the woman said. Her voice was muffled, but Sarah heard her clearly. "You're the one who can close it." "Who are you?" "The ones who have been waiting, the ones who knew this day would come." She pulled a small device from her coat, a box of metal and glass that hummed with a light that was not quite electric. "We have weapons the army doesn't know about. We have words the priests have forgotten. We have fire that burns what flesh cannot touch. But we need you." "I don't know how to close it." "Yes," the woman said. "You do. You chose once. You can choose again." The battle raged for hours. The soldiers fought with flame, with bullets, with desperation. The Shoggoths came in waves, each wave larger than the last, each wave pushing closer to the barricades, to the city, to the light. And in the center of it all, Sarah stood with the woman in the dark coat, watching, waiting, knowing that the choice was hers. "There are older gods," the woman said as the flames lit the night sky. "Older than Cthulhu, older than the stars, older than the void. They have been sleeping too, but they are not evil. They are not good. They are simply there. And they can be called..." "How?" The woman held out the device. It was warm, pulsing, alive. With words, with will, with the same power that opened the door. Sarah took it. The device hummed in her hands, vibrating with a frequency that she felt in her bones. She looked at the pit, at the darkness, at the things that were rising from it. "What do I say?" The woman told her. Words that were not words, sounds that were not sounds, a rhythm that was older than language, older than thought, older than the world. Sarah closed her eyes. She opened her mouth. She spoke. "Ea, Shub-Niggurath, the black goat of the woods with 1,000 young." The earth shook. The light in the pit flickered, dimmed, went out. The Shoggoths screamed, writhed, began to dissolve into the darkness from which they had come. The soldiers stopped firing. The flames died, and for a moment there was silence. Then the light returned. Not the light from the pit, not the light that had risen from the pool. It was a different light, older, colder, light from the stars that had been there before the first gods were born. It filled the sinkhole, poured over its edges, washed across the broken streets like water. And in that light, Sarah saw something she had not seen before. The door was closing. Not by her will, not by the will of the woman beside her, but by something older, something that had been waiting for this moment since the first door was opened. The bricks were shifting, the iron was bending, the darkness was being pushed back. She watched it close. She watched it seal. She watched the light fade and the darkness retreat and the city begin to forget. The woman in the dark coat was gone when she turned. The soldiers were packing up their equipment, their faces blank, their eyes distant, as if they had already begun to forget what they had seen. The sinkhole was just a sinkhole now, a hole in the ground that would be filled with concrete and asphalt and the memory of something that had never happened. Sarah stood at its edge, looking down at the darkness that was no longer there. She thought of the face that had risen from the pool, the eyes that had opened, the choice she had made. She had not closed the door, she had opened another one. And the thing that was sleeping, the thing that was waiting, the thing that would rise when the stars were right, it was still there. It would always be there. It would wait for another door, another fool, another moment when the stars aligned. But not today, not tomorrow, perhaps not for 100 years. She turned away from the pit and walked back toward the city. The lights were coming on, the streets were filling, the world was forgetting. She let it. She had done what she could. She had chosen what she could. And when the stars were right again, when the door opened again, she would be gone. But someone else would be there, someone else would choose. That was how it worked. That was how it had always worked. The old ones waited. The stars turned. And the door that was closed today would be opened again when the time was right. Sarah Chen walked home through the cold, gray morning, and she did not look back.